Yo, the moment you figure out that you're being made irrelevant, first thing you need to do is explore the nature of the issue, how it came to be, how it's structured, and then you need to find people that out to ally with, and then strategize. Because this shit is done. Yo, welcome back to the Onyx Report, Black Masculinist news for the day. Hope everybody's well. It's a little bit of a rough period. It's like my third teaching day in the semester, so I'm getting into that groove. But, oh yeah, my son got robbed at gunpoint yesterday, man. And so, still a little thrown about that coming home from school. But anyway, he's good. We're blessed. So, that's what it is. Anyway, so let's get to it. So this is going to be a brief one, but ran across this on Twitter the other day and wanted to shout out the sister that pointed it out. Her name is Andy, and I'm about to show you what she posted, but what she says is key. She says the erasure of black men is a glaring issue. This is toxic feminism masquerading as ADOS education. Now, what is she talking about? Well, this document here that she posted says concerns found within College Board's submitted AP African American Studies course. And so if you look around the left column, you see topics from AP course and then the concern. So the first one, topic 4.15, intersectionality and activism. Now, the key to intersectionality, and we've talked about this on this channel quite a bit, this is a concept that comes out of Kimberly Crenshaw's work, but it was popularized, before and after. I mean, you had people talking about interlocking systems of oppression, but at the end of the day, it deals with, the fundamental identities, as it were, and the extent to which black women find themselves oppressed along a series of axes, right? Race, class, sex, gender, and a number of others that have become popular since 1989 to look at, right? At the time, Crenshaw made the argument that black men and women shared much of that, except that black men were privileged by their gender, right? So black men and women were oppressed in terms of race, class, sex, gender, and everything else, except that black men were privileged by gender rather than being oppressed by it. And because of that, because we were men, we enjoyed benefits that women didn't, right? Overlooking the works of people like Jim Sedanius that actually argued empirically that because we were men, we were actually sought after more, hyper arrested more, assaulted more. And he wasn't necessarily talking just about black men. He was saying whenever you have one group that comes in and conquers another, it tends to be a male on male dynamic. So this is where you get to Dr. Tommy Curry's racism as misandric aggression, right? Racism, most prominent and visible and dominant features are often an attack on men, right? And boys for that matter, right? Especially when you look at education, the treatment of boys, who's disciplined the most, who's expelled the most, right? Who has the lowest academic performance levels, right? And we generally interpret that in terms of their, intellectual capability rather than their systemic exclusion from being treated as human beings and educated properly. So we don't look at it along those lines. So we find that men and boys, black men and boys at that, tend to get the blunt end of the stick. Nevertheless, here, focusing on intersectionality and activism, you have really no presence for black men. And the funny thing about this, before I go into it, I've seen other scholars and academics comment on it on public media, but nobody will actually use the terms black male. They'll dance all around it, but they actually won't talk about how this document excludes black males because we can't say it without social punishment. Anyway, so it says on the right-hand side, concern, intersectionality is foundational to CRT and ranks people based on their race, wealth, gender, and sexual orientation. And then it has the readings, Kimberly Crenshaw, of course, Angela Davis. Right? feminists. So then you go to the next one, Black Queer Studies. Roderick Ferguson, as it says on the right-hand side in terms of the reading, who explains we have to encourage and develop practices whereby queerness isn't a surrender to the status quo of race, class, gender, and sexuality. It means building forms of queerness that reject the given realities of the government and the market. Forgive me, the document, even for me, is a little cloudy, so I apologize about the lack of clarity. It is how I found it. But the thing about it is, part of the issue, and I can say this in Africana studies, but as well in these intersectional circles, is there's at least three ideas about straight Black men that kind of go into that are kind of understood wisdom, right? First of which is that when you talk about heterosexual masculinity, particularly in the Black community, it's inherently toxic, it's inherently oppressive, it's inherently patriarchal, right? I should say just leave it at toxic, because patriarchy is the second component. So there's something inherently negative about masculinity, right? And particularly heterosexual masculinity. That's the first part. The second part is that it's inherently patriarchal. This is the attitude. I don't believe this. I'm not arguing that this is true. But I'm saying these are some of the prevailing assumptions that are often made about masculinity that often don't even need to be spoken aloud at this point. It's just accepted in these circles, right? So the fact that it's patriarchal means it's inherently oppressive. And therefore, in response, men have to be checked and silenced before they even come in the door. Right? I don't care if you're talking about BLM meetings. I don't care if you're talking about Black feminist classes. It's the same kind of attitude. And the fact that those two groups overlap isn't an accident. The last thing is there's a kind of under the table idea that there's really nothing new to learn about Black men. We know all there is. Right? There's been, and I would argue this attitude's probably been prevalent since the late 1990s, even within fields like Africana studies. We know all there is to know about Black males. There's really nothing else to talk about. As long as you can talk about prison, as long as you can talk about, police brutality, you kind of know all there is to know. And Black male studies has been disproving that notion time and time again, but that's still a prevailing idea. So when you get to this studies course, this African American studies course, you can kind of see those parallels, those ideas, running through the logic of these documents. So the third component, topics 4.29, movement for Black lives. That's basically BLM, right? Which is an extension of the first two, intersectionality and Black queer studies. It's just really actualized into an organizational format. And we've seen the history of that. And we've laid out on this channel and many others that all they really did is exploit Black male death for profit. And when that became evident, everybody ran from it, right? But then you got people that gaslight it, that turn around and say, well, you guys may have been right about it, but nobody likes you because you're inherently sexist and misogynist, so nobody listened. Bullshit. It wasn't that nobody listened. It's that we weren't talking to the public. We were talking to each other. Black men in spaces like this were actually having a conversation with each other. We were talking to each other about BLM. None of us were knocking on the door of any major publication because we checked out from a lot of that. We were talking to each other and other people were listening in. But that said, get to the next one, topic 4.16, Black feminist literary thought, bell hooks. They capitalized her name, which is interesting in and of itself, but nonetheless, that's their go-to, right? Most particularly when they talk about Black men. So you have to avoid actually listening to Black men unless those Black men have been vetted and demonstrated to be good pets. But short of that, they stick with bell hooks. And that's supposed to actually replace Black male voices about the Black male condition, right? Let bell hooks, prominent feminists, tell us what Black men experience, what they think, what they feel, and what they need. We're prescribed to in this way by a trusted source. But you do have, a collective of, intersectional feminist males that are allowed to speak, as long as they don't stray too far from the given script. Usually you don't see male intersectional feminists disagree with the women, the theorists, the Black feminist theorists. They don't disagree. They don't push back. They just, toe the line. And as long as they toe the line, they'll get petted on the head. If they say anything contradictory, they're misogynist, they're sexist. And trust me when I tell you, Black feminists break their toys. Anytime you step out of line as a good little pet, mascot, they will consume you. But anyway, get to topic 4.30, the reparations movement. On the right, it says all points and resources in this study advocate for reparations. There is no critical perspective or balancing opinion in this lesson. Well, I can tell you in the Black male political agenda, we also talk about reparations. we talk about why reparations, at least a segment of it, needs to actually target black men specifically. Looking at the history of slavery, and on gender terms, the history of policy on gender terms, there were policies that were directly targeted at black men and need to be regarded because they had lasting impact. And then the last one, topic 4.31, Black Study and Black Struggle in the 21st Century. And you get Robin D.G. Kelley and his works on arguing about activism rather than the university system as the catalyst for social transformation, right? And that's it. That's it. Robin D.G. Kelley is allowed to speak as an assumed heterosexual black male theorist and scholar because he's talking about activism, and activism is a well-received subject in the matter. It's an acceptable subject, but nobody on here that actually talks about black men. Nobody finds that questionable. But this is the field that I find myself in. And the more conferences I attend in my own field, this is what I see reflected back. And there's a palpable silence, not only about black men, but from black men in these circles. Nobody's allowed to say anything without worrying about the blowback on their jobs, on their status, on their career, on their reputations. And then it leads to issues about funding, issues about who even gets into college, let alone graduate school, and nobody wants to talk about that either. This is how you get to, well, I'll let you watch it for yourself. Check this out.
These are 7 grants for women-owned businesses you can apply for in 2023. One is LOLs. You can either put their information in the search bar or type it in Google and do it that way. It'll take you to the website. It'll show you information on the grant and how to apply to it. I Fund Women. This is another website you can go to visit through Google. It'll take you to their site as well. It'll show you information on the grant and how to apply, what's the requirements. 3 is Cartier Women Initiative. This is another grant that's currently ongoing. 4 is Tory Burch. Tory Burch is also giving out $5,000 in business. 5 is the Amber Grant. They're giving away $10,000 each month, as well as 225,000 year-end grants. So make sure you tap in. Don't sleep on these opportunities. It might be challenging, but you won't know if you'll win unless you apply. So take advantage. This is just what the application look like. 6 is Launch. Launch is another one that's females, I should say ladies, can apply for as well to obtain up to $10,000 in cash grant. And last but not least is Stacy Snack.